The jungle was eerily silent, the usual symphony of chirping insects and distant animal calls drowned by the heavy mist rolling in from the east. A shadow moved, a small figure, barely more than a silhouette against the towering trees, stumbled onto the dirt road. He was just a child, alone. The boy's tiny frame trembled as he clutched his arms around himself. His clothes, too thin for the cold morning air, were damp with dew, and his sneakers were caked in mud. Tear-streaked cheeks glowed under the pale light of dawn, his breath coming in sharp, hiccuping gasps. But what was more terrifying than his loneliness was the unmistakable roar that suddenly shattered the silence. From beyond the trees, something was coming. The boy's breath hitched as his wide, frightened eyes darted toward the sound. The crunch of paws against gravel, a steady, deliberate rhythm. Predatory. Calculated. His lips quivered as he let out a small, helpless whimper, his mind too young to comprehend the danger approaching. Then the mist parted. A massive lion emerged. Golden fur rippled with each measured step, muscles moving like a well-oiled machine beneath his powerful frame. His deep amber eyes, sharp and unyielding, locked onto the boy. And then he stopped. The lion's nostrils flared. He took a slow, deep inhale, tasting the air. His ears flicked forward, his gaze unreadable. And then, without warning, he roared, a thunderous, earth-shaking sound that sent birds bursting from the treetops. The boy flinched, frozen in sheer terror. The lion lowered his head, baring his teeth. Was this the end? The ground trembled beneath the force of the lion's roar, a sound that ripped through the jungle like a war cry. The boy's breath hitched, his tiny hands gripping the damp fabric of his jacket as he shrank against the dirt road. He could feel the beast's presence. Overwhelming, suffocating. The lion's golden mane rippled with every breath, his deep amber eyes locked onto the child with an intensity that sent icy fear through his veins. For what felt like an eternity, the two stared at each other, the boy frozen, the lion calculating. Then the beast moved. One heavy paw stepped forward, claws sinking slightly into the damp earth. The boy's pulse pounded against his skull. Was this it? The lion's lips curled slightly, revealing glistening fangs. His muscles tensed, his tail flicking sharply to the side, a predator's instinct kicking in. Then he stopped. Something shifted in the lion's gaze. Not hunger, not rage, something else. A flicker of hesitation, recognition. The jungle remained deathly still, as if nature itself was holding its breath, waiting. The boy's swollen, tear-gilled eyes reflected in the lion's own, and for a brief moment, something inexplicable passed between them. A silent exchange, a moment of understanding. Then, without warning, the lion's head snapped toward the trees. His ears twitched, his nostrils flaring. Another presence was near. The lion's entire posture changed, going from predatory to defensive. He inhaled sharply, his gaze darting beyond the boy's trembling form. And then he roared again, but this time it was not at the child. It was at something lurking just beyond the mist. The jungle, once still, erupted with an eerie tension. The lion's second roar was different, deeper, more commanding, like a warning meant for something unseen. The boy, now too frightened to cry, barely dared to breathe. His instinct screamed at him to turn around, to see what had captured the beast's attention, but fear held him in place. Then a sound, not the rustling of leaves in the wind, not the chirping of birds, something heavier, slow, calculated. A presence lurking just beyond the haze of morning mist. Scout's muscles coiled, his ears pinned forward, and his tail flicked sharply against the dirt. The boy could feel it now, too, a chill slithering down his spine as the air around him thickened with an unspoken threat. And then, movement. The jungle shadows shifted, and from the mist emerged another lion. larger than Scout, its coat a darker shade, its eyes piercing and cold. The beast stepped onto the dirt path, its powerful shoulders rolling with each deliberate stride. Its gaze, however, was not fixed on the boy. It was locked onto Scout. The realization crashed down like a thunderclap. This was not just another lion. This was an intruder, a challenger. The boy's breath came in quick, shallow bursts as he instinctively pressed himself closer to the ground. The road had transformed into a battlefield. The two lions stood motionless, their golden eyes burning into each other, waiting for the other to make the first move. Then, in a blur of muscle and fury, Scout lunged. A deafening roar split the air as the two beasts clashed. Fangs flashing, claws tearing, the ground shaking beneath their battle. And the boy, caught in the middle, had nowhere to run. The jungle erupted into chaos. Dust swirled into the morning air as the two lions crashed together in a violent storm of muscle and fury. Growls and roars echoed through the trees, primal and raw. The boy, still frozen on the dirt road, squeezed his eyes shut as claws raked through the air and powerful bodies slammed against the ground. Scout was relentless. His golden mane bristled with rage, his massive paws striking with precision, his sharp fangs snapping dangerously close to the intruder's throat. But the dark-coated lion was no ordinary opponent. He was a rogue, one hardened by battles, a nomad who had fought his way across the wild, taking what he wanted, when he wanted. And now he wanted territory. He wanted dominance. The challenger snarled and lunged, catching Scout off guard. A brutal swipe connected, tearing through Scout's shoulder. The mighty lion stumbled, and for a split second it looked as if he might fall. The rogue pounced, aiming for the kill. The boy gasped. Instinctively, Scout twisted, dodging the final strike with a swift movement. Then, in an explosion of power, he countered. With a mighty roar, Scout launched himself at the rogue, his teeth sinking deep into the intruder's flank. The dark lion bellowed in pain. Defeated, he tore away, limping into the trees, his growl fading into the dense jungle. Silence settled over the battlefield. Scout, panting heavily, turned his gaze back to the child. His amber eyes, once fierce, softened. He had fought for something greater than territory. He had fought to protect. And now, with the danger gone, the question remained. What would he do with the boy? The jungle had fallen eerily silent. The echoes of the brutal fight still hung in the air, but the rogue lion had vanished into the shadows, leaving only the victor standing. Scout, blood-streaked but undefeated, turned toward the boy. His massive chest rose and fell, his breath still heavy from the battle. The child, wide-eyed and trembling, barely dared to move. Then, Scout took a step forward. The boy flinched, his tiny hands gripping the damp earth beneath him. Would the lion see him as prey now that the fight was over? The air was thick with tension, the only sound the faint rustling of leaves in the distance. Then, something unexpected happened. Instead of attacking, Scout lowered his great head until his golden mane nearly brushed the child's face. His deep amber eyes studied the boy, not with hunger, but with something else. Curiosity? Recognition. He let out a low rumble. Not a roar of dominance, but a sound almost reassuring. The boy, still afraid, turned his head slightly, glancing toward the path where the other lion had disappeared. A whimper escaped his lips, and something in that small, helpless sound seemed to strike Scout like a bolt of lightning. His ears twitched, his tail flicked once. Then, with deliberate purpose, the great lion moved, not away, but closer. And then, he did something no one would believe unless they had seen it with their own eyes. He lay down. Right there, next to the child, his powerful frame forming an unbreakable barrier between the boy and the dangers of the wild. Scout had made his choice. He wasn't just a lion anymore. He was a guardian. The sun had started its slow descent, painting the sky in streaks of orange and deep crimson. The jungle, once vibrant with the sounds of life, now seemed heavy with an unsettling quiet. Ethan gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles turning white as he sped down the narrow dirt road. He didn't know what he was expecting, but the distress call had sent a shiver down his spine. A child. In the reserve. Alone. His heart pounded as his jeep roared through the uneven terrain, kicking up clouds of dust. How was this even possible? The reserve was heavily protected, its boundaries reinforced after the recent poaching incidents. No one should be able to get in unnoticed. Then, up ahead, he saw them. At first it was just a golden blur in the distance. A massive lion crouched low in the fading light, its thick mane shifting slightly in the evening breeze. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Scout. His lion. But beside him, Ethan's blood ran cold. A small figure sat curled up against the beast's side. A child. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to act, but his body felt frozen. Scout wasn't attacking. He wasn't circling or growling. He was protecting. But why? Ethan forced himself to move. He cut the engine, the jeep lurching to a halt. Silence. Not even the birds stirred. Scout lifted his massive head and locked eyes with the ranger. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, ever so slowly, Scout stood. Would he let Ethan take the boy, or was he guarding him against everyone? Ethan swallowed hard, his pulse roaring in his ears. The massive lion had risen to his full height, his golden eyes locked onto Ethan with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. Scout was not moving aside. His massive frame stood protectively over the small, fragile child curled against his side, shielding him from whatever danger lurked beyond the ranger's understanding. The child. Ethan could barely breathe as he took in the boy's tiny, shaking frame. Dirt clung to his tear-streaked cheeks, his blue hoodie sagging over his shoulders. He wasn't crying anymore. He was watching Scout. As if waiting for the lion to tell him what to do next, Ethan stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. Scout. "It's me." His voice was barely above a whisper, thick with tension. The lion's ears twitched, his nostrils flaring, as if assessing Ethan's presence. Then Scout let out a deep, rumbling growl. Not a threat, but a warning. Not yet. Not too close. Ethan's stomach twisted. Was Scout protecting the boy from him? Something wasn't right. Why was this child here? Where had he come from? Then, from the depths of the reserve, a rustling, a shift in the wind. Scout's head snapped toward the darkness beyond the trees, his muscles coiling like a spring. Something was out there. Ethan's breath hitched. Was it another lion? Poachers? Something worse? The boy whimpered, gripping a handful of Scout's thick mane. Scout's growl deepened, his body tensing. Ethan had seconds to decide. Stand still, risk losing the boy, or move and face whatever nightmare lay hidden in the trees. A sharp crack echoed through the trees, a snapped branch, too deliberate, too close. Ethan's muscles tensed as Scout's growl deepened into a guttural warning, his ears pinned back, his golden eyes locked on something beyond the dense foliage. The boy clutched Scout's mane tighter, his small frame trembling. Whatever was out there, Scout had sensed it first. Ethan's fingers twitched toward the rifle strapped to his back, but he hesitated. If it was another lion, a sudden movement could provoke an attack. If it was a person, then why had they not revealed themselves? The bushes ahead rustled again, heavier this time. Something or someone was watching them. Scout let out a thunderous roar, the force of it shaking the very air around them. The boy flinched but did not cry. His wide eyes flickered between Scout and the unseen presence beyond the trees. Then, suddenly, silence. The forest held its breath. Nothing moved, no rustling, no footfalls, only the faint whisper of wind shifting through the leaves. Whoever, or whatever, had been there was now gone. But Ethan wasn't convinced. His gut screamed that they were not alone. Something about the way Scout remained poised, his body coiled like a predator ready to strike, told Ethan the danger had not passed. With slow, measured steps, Ethan reached down, his hands carefully scooping the boy into his arms. He felt the child's tiny heartbeat hammering against his own chest. Scout followed, his every step cautious, his gaze never leaving the tree line. Ethan had to get the boy out of there, but deep inside, he knew this wasn't over. Someone had left the child here, and now someone was watching. Ethan's grip on the boy tightened as he quickened his pace back toward the jeep. His instincts screamed at him. Something wasn't right. The eerie silence pressing in around them felt unnatural, almost suffocating. Scout moved like a shadow beside him, muscles taut, golden eyes flicking between the trees. Then, a sound. A low, almost imperceptible rustling from behind. Ethan spun around, heart hammering. The bushes parted, ever so slightly, and in that moment he saw it. A figure lurking just beyond the tree line, partially obscured by the dense foliage. Not an animal. A person. Watching. Ethan's breath caught. His grip on the boy's small frame instinctively tightened as Scout let out a warning growl that rumbled deep in his chest. The figure didn't move. But Ethan knew what he saw. Someone was out there. Someone had been following them. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the shadow vanished. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. He had spent years in the wild tracking and studying animals. But this was different. There was intelligence behind this presence. A calculated stillness. A hunter's patience. Who had abandoned this boy here? And who was lurking in the shadows, making sure he stayed lost? Panic clawed at his throat, but he forced it down. Think, Ethan. Act. He turned back toward the jeep, adjusting his grip on the child. They had to get out now. But as they neared the vehicle, a chilling realization settled deep in his gut. The jeep door was open, and the keys that should have been in his pocket, gone. Ethan's stomach clenched. The jeep door hung open like a silent warning. His fingers instinctively patted his pocket again, as if the keys would magically reappear. But they were gone. His pulse thundered in his ears. Someone had taken them. Someone wanted them stranded. Scout growled, his golden eyes locked on the tree line. He saw something, or someone. Ethan swallowed hard, adjusting his grip on the child. Every instinct screamed at him to run. But where? The jeep was useless without the keys, and the nearest outpost was miles away through treacherous terrain. And they weren't alone. A branch snapped. Ethan whirled around, his breath freezing in his chest. From the darkness, a figure emerged. A man, dressed in ragged clothes, his face partially hidden by a hood. But Ethan didn't need to see his face to understand one thing. This wasn't a rescuer. That boy isn't yours. The stranger's voice was low, almost casual, but there was an edge to it, a warning. Ethan's grip on the child tightened. He could feel David trembling in his arms. Then whose is he? Ethan shot back, trying to keep his voice steady. The man chuckled, a sound that sent ice through Ethan's veins. Does it matter? He asked. You won't be leaving with him. Before Ethan could react, Scout did. With a deafening roar, the lion lunged, closing the distance between them in an instant. The stranger's smirk vanished, replaced by sheer terror. He stumbled backward, scrambling toward the bushes, but it was too late. Scout didn't attack, but he didn't need to. The sheer power of the beast sent the man bolting into the jungle, vanishing into the night. David waited, expressing David close. They weren't safe yet, but Scout had just given them a chance. Now, they had to survive the night. This incredible journey teaches us a powerful lesson about fate, courage, and the unbreakable bond between man and beast. Ethan never expected to find himself protecting a child abandoned in the wilderness, just as he had once rescued Scout as a helpless cub. But life has a mysterious way of bringing people and animals together for a reason. Through heart-stopping moments of danger, Ethan proved that true bravery isn't about facing fear alone, but about standing firm for those who need us the most. And Scout, once a vulnerable orphan himself, showed that even the most fearsome creatures have hearts capable of compassion and loyalty. In the end, Ethan, David, and Scout formed an unlikely but perfect family. One built not by blood, but by love, trust, and destiny. What would you have done in Ethan's place? Would you have taken in the child, or let fate decide his future? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to support more heartwarming and suspenseful tales. Thank you for watching, and remember, true heroes come in all forms. Have a wonderful day, and see you in the next story.